My wife thought she could cheat, walk away, and leave me in the wreckage. But the moment I walked in on her betrayal, everything changed. I wasn't going to let her destroy me without consequences. Not this time. For years, we lived a life that looked perfect on paper. I was a successful lawyer, she was a respected artist, and together we had the kind of love that people envied, at least, that's what they thought. On the surface, everything seemed idyllic. We had the house, the vacations, the shared dreams. We had a daughter who filled our home with joy, and I thought, without question, that we had each other. But behind closed doors, cracks were starting to form, and I failed to see them until it was too late. Her name was Clara. I still think about how, once upon a time, I couldn't imagine my life without her. Her laugh was like a melody, and the way her eyes would light up when she talked about her art. It used to be everything to me. We shared everything, our hopes, our fears, our passions, but somehow, I missed the signs that our connection was unraveling. It began small. Little moments that, when strung together, painted a darker picture than I cared to acknowledge. Clara started working later at the gallery, canceling plans last minute, becoming distant at night. She was always tired, busy, or stressed. The excuses started stacking up, and I just let them slide. I wanted to believe it was nothing, just the pressures of life, the strain of our careers, the challenges of parenting. But inside, I felt the shift. And then, the day came, the day everything shattered, the day I realized she wasn't just slipping away emotionally, but physically as well. That night, I came home early to surprise her with dinner. I wanted to remind her of who we were, what we had. But when I opened the door, the scene before me took my breath away. It wasn't the smell of dinner I was greeted with, it was the sound of someone else's voice, a man's voice, and Clara's laugh, the same laugh that used to make me feel like I was the luckiest man alive. But now, it felt like a dagger to my chest. I stood there frozen, the door still half open, my hand gripping the knob, trying to convince myself that I hadn't just walked into a nightmare. But there they were. She was sitting on the couch, her head leaning against his chest, their hands entwined. The betrayal was obvious, suffocating. My heart dropped to the pit of my stomach, and I felt my world crash down around me in a deafening silence. The man didn't even seem to notice me standing there, but Clara's eyes, when they met mine, they were filled with fear, shame, and a hint of guilt. I should have walked away, but I didn't. I stood there, paralyzed, my mind racing with anger, confusion, and heartbreak. And then, she said it, those words that would haunt me forever. I didn't mean for it to happen, but I've fallen in love with him. The world spun, and my body felt like it was no longer mine to control. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but the only thing I could do was stand there and let the weight of her confession crush me. That was the moment everything changed. It wasn't just her confession that wrecked me, but the cold, detached way she said it. No apology, no remorse, just a painful acknowledgement that she had moved on. It was like I was standing in front of a stranger who had once been my everything. The man, his name was Mark, finally looked up, his expression one of mild surprise, as if he hadn't expected me to be there. But there was no remorse in his eyes, no shame. He stood up, casually as if we were meeting for the first time, extending his hand. "I'm Mark," he said with a cool smile. "Clara and I have been seeing each other for a few months." A few months. It had been months of lies, deceit, and betrayal that I had unknowingly let slide. My blood boiled. How could she do this to me? To us? "I think you should leave," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but thick with anger. Clara didn't protest. She simply looked down, her hands nervously twisting in her lap. Mark shrugged and walked out, leaving us alone in the suffocating silence of our broken home. I didn't know what to say. My mind was racing, my thoughts colliding, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The woman I loved had betrayed me in the most gut-wrenching way possible. She thought she could cheat and walk away without consequences, but she was wrong. "You," I started, my voice faltering. "You think this is over? That you can just walk away and leave me in the wreckage?" "I never wanted to hurt you," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper, but her words cut through me like a knife. But I don't love you anymore. My heart felt like it was being torn apart in that moment. The woman I had built my life with, the woman I had trusted with my soul, no longer loved me. I want a divorce, she said, her eyes avoiding mine. Those words echoed in my mind, a cold, final declaration that there was no going back. I was losing everything. The days that followed were a blur of rage and disbelief. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't breathe without feeling the suffocating weight of her betrayal. I kept asking myself over and over how this had happened, where I had gone wrong, what I could have done differently. I started digging. I couldn't help it. I needed answers. Clara had already moved out by the time I'd calmed down enough to think clearly, but I found myself at the gallery one evening, searching for some shred of evidence that could explain what had led her to this point. And then I saw an email, left open on her desk. It was from Mark, and it confirmed everything I feared. It wasn't just an affair. It was an emotional entanglement, a bond that had been growing long before she'd ever left me. I didn't know what to do with this information at first. Should I confront her? Should I go after Mark? The rage inside me burned hot, and the thought of standing by while she walked away with everything, our home, our daughter, was too much to bear. But then, the realization hit me, I didn't need to fight her. I didn't need to fight him. I needed to fight for myself. I spent days plotting my next move. But as I planned, something inside me shifted. The anger that consumed me began to transform into something darker, something more dangerous, a desire for revenge. I wasn't going to let Clara just walk away, thinking she could destroy everything I'd worked for, everything I believed in, without paying the price. It all came to a head at a family gathering. My daughter, Lily, had invited Clara. I knew this was my chance to confront her in front of everyone, to show her that I wasn't weak, that I wasn't just going to let her tear our lives apart and walk away unscathed. But I had a surprise for her, something she hadn't seen coming. At the dinner table, the conversation was light at first, almost casual, as if the world hadn't been shattered just days before. Clara sat there, trying to hold it together, pretending everything was normal. But I could see the guilt in her eyes. She knew what was coming. I stood up and addressed the room, my voice steady but filled with an intensity that grabbed everyone's attention. I have something to say, I started, my eyes never leaving Clara's face. Clara thought she could cheat and walk away from our life without consequences. But that's not how this works. The truth is, you can't just destroy a family and expect everything to fall into place for you. The room fell silent. My daughter, Lily, who had been quietly listening, stood up, her eyes filled with a fierce resolve. She looked directly at Clara. "You heard Dad," Lily said, her voice strong and unwavering. "And I can't just pretend like everything's okay. You don't get to just walk away from this." Clara's face paled, and I saw her knees buckle as she sank to the ground. She wasn't crying, she wasn't begging me to forgive her. She was begging Lily. Begging her for mercy. But Lily just turned her back and walked away, her face hardening with every step. The truth of it hit Clara in that moment. She had lost everything, her family, her dignity, her reputation. And the realization was written all over her face. There was no coming back from this. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a new kind of silence. The divorce was finalized quickly, the legal battles quick and dirty. Clara disappeared from my life, but not from my heart. There were moments, small, fleeting moments, when I wondered if I had made a mistake, if there was any chance we could have salvaged things. But then I would remember that look on her face at the dinner table, the moment she realized the cost of her choices. I was broken, but I wasn't destroyed. I learned, painfully, that some things can never be repaired. People can betray you, hurt you, and leave you in the dust, but they can't take away the person you choose to become after. And that's where the real strength lies. The revenge wasn't in getting back at Clara or Mark. It was in finding myself again. I built a new life. One where I was whole again. And Clara? She'll live with the consequences of her choices. I made sure of that.